Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. My name is Mustafa Nanusa, and I'm here with my partner, Mohammed Salim. We're both from the law office of Davis in Nanusa, Ikhlas and Salim. And we're going to talk to you for a few minutes, hopefully 10 to 15 minutes, about just give you an update on the different immigration matters. First, beginning with what is happening with what is called the Muslim ban, and then second, Mohammed is going to talk to you about DACA, and also about some of the updates in the privacy law. The updates in the privacy law is an area that's very rarely talked about, but it might be one of the more important areas. I almost feel like nobody wants you to know about it because it affects so many of your lives and you may not realize it. So let me begin first with the immigration ban. So as many of you know, in January 27th of 2017, President Trump passed our first executive order, and if you didn't know it yet, you should know it by that executive order that all of you are the terrorists. Because the name of the order itself is called Protecting the Nation from Foreign Terrorist Entry into the United States. So it's protecting the nation from foreign terrorists, but all the countries that were named in that executive order were all Muslim majority countries. So that sends you a message, all of you. And countries with Iraq, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, and Yemen. And immigration from those countries was banned for basically about 90 days. And then for refugees, it was 120 days. Then on March 6th of 2017, they revised it, because by that time, many lawyers, many citizens just like yourselves went to the airport or flooded the airports, protesting. And so they changed it, people calling it a Muslim ban. So what they changed was a couple of things. One, they dropped Iraq from the list. There are many different reasons as to why they dropped Iraq. One is because Iraq, where we have a lot of government contracts, they said, well, if you're going to be banned, we're not going to allow government contractors to come. They said, well, that's not a good idea, so let's drop Iraq from that list. Also, they realized that when they first issued the order, when the president first issued the order, it affected many people that we didn't know whether or not they were affected or not. For example, citizens, there were people that had dual citizenship from Iran, Iraq, Libya. People who were legal permanent residents, who were green card holders, are they affected? Students, are they affected? So a lot of people that were prevented from coming into the country that we were not sure whether or not they were allowed to or not. So the changes was that people like green card holders, student visa holders, people that already had visas to come into the country and so on and so forth, those people were not affected or allowed to come into the country. Then on September 24th of 2017 was the third one. By this time, I guess people kept calling it the Muslim ban. They figured we have to find a way to make sure they don't call it the Muslim ban anymore. So they dropped Sudan. I don't know why, but they dropped Sudan. And they added Chad.
Dropped Sudan.
I mean, it was on the list. Yeah, it was removed. Sudan was removed from the list. And they added to the list Chad, a majority Muslim country, but then they added North Korea and Venezuela, which are not predominantly Muslim countries. I guess I figured by adding those two, you can't call it a Muslim ban anymore, but still the majority of the countries that are on that list are majority Muslim countries. But pretty much the same thing, the same restrictions apply, and the same allowances apply for green card holders and so on and so forth. There have been a lot of lawsuits from Hawaii, Minnesota, from the District of Columbia, from Maryland, many different places, a lot of lawsuits, and one of them went to the Supreme Court, and that was a recent decision that was handed down from the Supreme Court. The arguments are just quickly, the arguments that were being made against the ban, like one of the more popular arguments was that the ban was motivated by hatred towards Muslims. Normally when a law is passed, if you want to challenge the law, claiming that the law is biased against a certain group of people, it's very difficult to do so because the lawmakers are not going to be sitting there saying, yes, this is against Muslims, this is against Jews, this is against Christians. They're not going to sit there saying those kind of things. But in this case, we actually did have the lawmaker, here it wasn't a real law, it was an executive order, saying during his campaigning that he was going to have a Muslim ban. So that's why it was easy to make that argument that it was being motivated and driven by what they call animus or hatred or animosity towards Muslims and Muslim countries. So after the latest Supreme Court's decision, basically what we're left with is the general limitations. This is what they call Muslim Ban 3.0. So it applies to individuals who are outside of the United States, effective September 27th to October 18th of 2017, depending on the country. It affects people who did not have a valid visa as of those dates. Also, people who have not obtained a waiver under Section 3. There's still some issues about what that waiver consists of. Waiver usually means that you are banned, but if you get an exception because you meet certain requirements, you'll be allowed to come into the country. So you will get a waiver to come into the country. It doesn't apply to lawful permanent residents or the green card holders, individuals admitted or paroled into the United States on or after the effective date. So sometimes, like if you get a waiver or for any other reason that you were being allowed into the country, you wouldn't be affected by that. Those are documents other than the visas that allows them to travel. People who are dual citizens of the United States and some of those countries. Refugees are already admitted to the United States. And individuals granted withholding of removal. That's an advanced parole. It's too long to explain, but basically people who were going to be deported, but they were allowed to basically stay in the country and not be deported. It wouldn't apply to those people. So the countries are still impacted on Iran, Libya, Somalia, Syria, Sudan, Yemen, Chad, North Korea, and Venezuela. You can get, CARE has a nice list, if you ever go to their website, of a little bit further breakdown. I don't want to take too much time going into every single country. A little bit better breakdown of how these countries are impacted. But if you're not from these countries, that doesn't mean that nothing's going to happen to you either. Even if you're an American citizen, in fact, if you're coming back into the country, you can be stopped. You're not going to be prevented from coming into the country, but you can be held for a very long time and be asked questions, what they call extreme vetting. That happens to a lot of people. And the area that Mohammed is going to talk about, which is really important, is when you're coming into the country, if you're an American citizen, if you're a naturalized citizen even, if you are applying for immigration benefits for a family member, some of the things that you have to divulge to immigration because of the change to the privacy law. These are very critical additions to the privacy law. I hope you stick around so you can hear a little bit more of that. Sorry.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Mohammed Salim. I'm a staff desk partner in the law firm of Davis and Danusa, Eclisson Salim, and my area of specialization is immigration rights, as well as some civil rights overlap as well. What I wanted to update the community was in regards to some of the policies that are being implemented by DHS. Department of Homeland Security has broad supervision over other agencies within it, such as USCIS. So if anybody's ever applied for any sort of immigration benefits or has been naturalized or has had a family member apply for a visa, they've dealt with Department of Homeland Security with regards to this. Earlier in this year, around October, Department of Homeland Security had a policy that it was implementing, and it was asking for public comment, and we were tracking it to see what was going to happen with that policy. It was a new policy in terms of privacy right. They were asking for social media disclosure of all individuals, whether citizens or non-citizens, that were asking for benefits under any sort of immigration application they were going to make. So you could be a naturalized citizen and they wanted you to disclose certain information. That did go into effect because it was part of the executive office in terms of how their policy making is made, and we're trying to see how it's going to be implemented. One of the ways that I've seen how it's being implemented is that another agency, U.S. Department of State, has now started asking for social media disclosures. Specifically, I've seen this with some of my clients that are applying for visas from countries. I'll give you an example. One of my clients who's applying for a visa from Morocco, he's married to a U.S. citizen, and in the visa disclosure, they asked for a social media disclosure. So the form that they asked him to fill out was a DS, Department of State form 5535. It's supplemental questions for visa applicants. And I'm just going to get right to the specific examples that they're asking you to disclose. They're saying, please provide, for social media, this is anything that they deem to be social media, and I'll talk about that, but this is what they're asking. Please provide your unique username for any websites or applications. So once again, it could be apps. It's not even like you went to a website on a computer and made an account or so forth. It could be an app that you downloaded on your phone. Applications you have used to create or share content. And in it, they put parentheses, photos, videos, status updates, etc., as part of your public profile within the last 5 years. So just think about that. And they want you to identify that a column of the social media platform and your social media handle. So if you have a Twitter account, if you have a Facebook account, if you have an Instagram account, they want you to identify what exactly is that platform that you're using, for example, Twitter, Facebook, and then they want you to identify your social media name or handle on that. That's a little bit of a concern because, are they going to be monitoring what we're doing in terms of our Facebook or our Twitter? I'll say yes, they will be. They're implementing it on immigrants that are applying for visas into this country, and if in the future, if you're a U.S. citizen and you're sponsoring, let's say, a family member of yours, whether it's you go back home and you get married and you have a son and you want to bring your wife and your children and so forth, they may ask you to disclose that even though you're a U.S.-born citizen. They may ask members of your family to disclose that. The one thing that I do want to emphasize about is that I think it's relevant for us is that they've actually put this in the form. They're saying that the information provided in this application and other information submitted may be provided to other U.S. government agencies having lawful authority to use some information. So you're thinking, okay, you know what, it's not a big deal. I'm just going to give this to Department of State or to DHS. Well, if you really pay attention to what's happening, the government's implementing an information sharing system, so FBI will get access to this information and may be able to use it. You can always assume the worst. What is the government going to be doing? What is the FBI going to be doing with this information? Well, they may be monitoring you, or they may be collecting, a massive analysis of who are your friends on Facebook, who are your friends on Twitter, who is following you on Twitter, who are you tweeting in terms of anything related to other people are doing. So this is something that's important. And the other thing that people don't kind of pay attention to when they're filling out these forms is they say, you know what, I'm not going to share anything with them. So this is right in these applications and these forms. They're identifying and they're saying that any willfully false or misleading statement or willful concealment of a material fact made by me herein may subject me to permanent exclusion from the United States, and if I'm admitted to the United States, may subject me to criminal prosecution and or removal. So just be aware of the fact that later on, if you do not disclose something, if they deem it to be something that was willfully done, they can start proceeding against you and try to allege the case that you intentionally hid information, whether it's to deprive you of some immigrant benefit that you were seeking or to further prosecute you in a criminal nature, because it's all spelled out. It's right before the area where you sign. So what we're trying to do is that raise attention and awareness about what it is that everybody's doing on social media. A lot of times we don't pay attention to what it is that we're doing in terms of whether we're on Facebook or Twitter and so forth. But just be aware of it. At the same time that we want to bring this to your attention so you can contact your local officials and say that this is a flawed policy. It's a policy that's targeting immigrants. It's a policy that has that's unfairly going towards a member of our society, whether it's immigrants or other visa members, and it's not subjecting other people. And you should make those arguments to your congressman in the words that are most comfortable with you. We're not going to sit here and tell you this is the exact language. We want you to understand what's happening, and by giving you an example of this. So just be aware of this, and this is only going to happen more and more. This is just one form or one example that I've laid out of what's happening to clients of mine that I've seen, and we want you to be aware of it. At the same time, we don't want you to do anything where you're going to present false information or not properly disclose certain information to immigration, because that has serious and detrimental consequences as well. I'll take questions to this afterwards as well, but just for the brevity of time, I want to make sure I cover this other aspect that is also important, which is our third final point as our update, is in regards to what's happening with DACA. Some of you may know what it is for those of you who are not familiar with DACA is DACA was the acronym, the DACA for Consideration of Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. So under President Obama, he had basically passed an executive order that was preventing he wasn't going to prosecute people that were here for basically kids that came here as children and they didn't have any immigration status. They weren't going to prosecute them, but the one great benefit of DACA was that simultaneously they were going to be given what is called employment authorization documents so that they can work, they can support themselves and their families and so forth. Under President Trump, he has issued a memorandum revoking that. So DACA is going to be ending, if not over already, because the time for you to file for a renewal or an application for that was October 5 of 2017. And if you didn't do it then, you've kind of missed out on the opportunity. What is that going? That program is eventually going to slowly wind down because they will no longer be issuing employment authorization documents for those people. And we're talking about a large number of people that came here as children or were eligible. $600,000 to $700,000, or excuse me, 600,000 to 700,000 people were within the estimated range. So that's more than 500,000 people in New York City, especially. You know, we know people or friends or family or others that were benefits of this. The purpose of bringing this to your attention is to show that, you know, we should be vigilant in terms of making sure that there is a policy action, a call for action. You know, there are bills being proposed in Congress. You know, the ones that we've looked at, that our law office has looked at, and others have campaigned is really the DREAM Act. It's the one that gives people the most benefit. Once again, it's the DREAM Act. It's the one that gives people the most benefits. Many Democrats are behind it. Unfortunately, Republicans are not. So if you're in an area where, let's say you live in Long Island and your local congressman is not for that, you should look into that because it really does help a lot of people that have benefited and haven't done anything wrong in this country or so. So that's our third and final update. And